February 2015, a law office in Brattleboro, Vermont. The attorneys laid out the estate documents on the conference table. The old man had passed away 8 months earlier. Neighbors remembered him as the quiet janitor who wore a coat held together with safety pins. His stepson sat across the table, expecting maybe a small inheritance, maybe nothing at all. The lawyer read the first number out loud. Silence. Someone asked him to repeat it. $8 million. Before we go further, an important note. This is a biographical story about Ronald Reed's life. It's told for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing in this video is financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. I'm not a financial advisor. Past performance, including Ronald's, doesn't guarantee or predict future results. Every financial situation is unique. Please consult with a licensed financial professional before making any investment decisions. $8 million in stocks. 95 different companies. Procter Gamble, JPMorgan Chase, General Electric, a portfolio more diversified than most hedge funds. The hospital was getting $4.8 million, the largest donation in its history. The library, $1.2 million, from a man who never earned more than $12 an hour in his life. The coat with the safety pins, the second-hand Toyota Yaris, the $12,000 house, all of it real. And the $8 million, also real. The town was in shock. How does a janitor who wore clothes held together with safety pins accumulate a fortune that put him in the top 1% of Americans? How does a man who drove a beat-up car own a stock portfolio that would make Wall Street professionals jealous? And the bigger question, why didn't anyone know? Not his stepson, not his neighbors, not a single person in the entire town of Brattleboro. For 44 years, Ronald James Reed had been hiding something, and he took the secret to his grave. To understand the $8 million, you have to go back, way back, to 1921. Ronald James Reed was born in Dummerston, Vermont, a small town where everyone knew everyone. His family was working class, nothing special, except for one thing. Ronald was the first person in his family to finish high school, not college, high school. That was the bar in 1930s rural Vermont. He grew up during the Great Depression. Watched neighbors' furniture carried out onto sidewalks, saw bank doors shut with people's savings locked inside, lines at soup kitchens stretched around blocks. Young Ronald learned something during those years, something he would never forget. Save everything. Trust nothing. Expect nothing from anyone. He wasn't brilliant, wasn't a prodigy, just a quiet kid from Vermont who learned to fix things, work with his hands, and keep his mouth shut. December 1941. Pearl Harbor. Ronald was 20 years old. He enlisted, military police. The next 4 years took him to North Africa, Italy, the Pacific Theater. The military drilled discipline into him. Wake at 0500. Bunk inspection. Follow orders. No questions. 4 years of routine that would shape the next 70. The war ended. Ronald came home. He was 24 years old. No savings, no college degree, no special skills beyond what the military had taught him. His brother owned a gas station in Brattleboro. Ronald took a job there, pumping gas, changing oil, the smell of gasoline. Cold Vermont winters, hands stained with oil. Maybe $1 or $2 an hour, maybe $3. The records don't say exactly, but it wasn't much. That was his starting point. A gas station attendant in small-town Vermont, making barely enough to survive. Most returning soldiers started there. Most stayed there or moved on to something slightly better. Ronald didn't. Somewhere between 1945 and 1950, Ronald bought his first shares of stock. Nobody remembers exactly when. He never talked about it, but he started reading, studying companies, blue-chip names, Procter Gamble, General Electric, companies that made products people bought every day. He didn't invest much, couldn't. A gas station attendant's salary didn't leave room for big investments. But he bought a few shares here, a few shares there, every month, no matter what. The 1950s passed. Ronald kept working at the gas station. 25 years. Same job, same routine. Around 1960, he got married. Her name was Barbara. They had a quiet life together. 2 stepsons. Nothing fancy. Ronald kept buying stocks. Still quietly. Still without telling anyone. Nobody paid attention to the quiet man who pumped gas. Ronald was 49 years old. He'd been married for about 10 years. Barbara became ill, cancer. She passed away. Ronald was a widower at 49, 2 stepsons, no wife, and a decision to make. He could remarry. Many men did. Start over, find companionship. He didn't. He decided something else.
something nobody knew about at the time. He would live alone, work, save, invest, and speak to absolutely no one about what he was building. 1970 was the year Ronald Red disappeared into silence. He took a new job, janitor at the local JC Penney. After 25 years pumping gas, he chose to clean floors. It paid, it was simple, it didn't require conversation, and every paycheck he bought more stocks. For the next 44 years, Ronald Red would live in almost complete isolation. No wife, no close friends, no confidants, just work and stocks, and a secret that would grow into $8 million. The question nobody could answer in February 2015 wasn't just how did he accumulate the money, it was why did he live like that for 44 years? The JC Penney in Brattleboro needed a janitor. He took it. After 25 years pumping gas, he was now cleaning floors, mopping, taking out trash, maybe $8 or $9 an hour by the mid-1970s, when minimum wage was $2.10. He could have found something better. A man with military service and 49 years of work experience could have done more, but Ronald didn't want more responsibility, didn't want management, didn't want to talk to people.
He wanted simple, predictable, a paycheck he could count on, and silent. Every 2 weeks, the paycheck came. He cashed it, took what he needed for rent, food, utilities. The rest went to his brokerage account. His method was simple, almost boring. He owned shares of companies people used every day. Procter Gamble made Tide detergent. Johnson & Johnson made Band-Aids. These weren't exciting companies. They didn't promise to change the world. They just made products people bought. Year after year, decade after decade. When the dividends came, Ronald didn't spend them. He bought more shares, the same companies, over and over. The 1970s were brutal for investors. Inflation ate into everything. Oil crisis, stagflation. The stock market went nowhere for a decade. People who invested in 1970 looked at their portfolios in 1979 and saw nothing but disappointment. Ronald kept buying. Nobody knew. His stepchildren lived their own lives. His co-workers at JC Penney saw the quiet janitor who kept to himself. His neighbors saw a man who lived alone in a modest house. Nobody saw the portfolio growing in silence. By 1975, maybe he had $30,000. By 1980, maybe $60,000. These are estimates. Ronald never told anyone the numbers. But a janitor saving consistently for 10 years with modest market returns, it would have been something like that. Not impressive, not yet, but something was happening underneath, something most people never see because they quit too early. The dividends were compounding. Each reinvested dividend bought more shares. More shares meant more dividends. More dividends bought even more shares. A snowball rolling down a hill, slow at first, then faster, then unstoppable. Most people retire at 65, collect Social Security, relax, travel, enjoy the time they have left. Ronald turned 65 in 1986. He kept cleaning floors, not because he needed the money. By the mid-1980s, his portfolio was probably worth over $100,000, maybe $150,000. His dividends alone could have supplemented his Social Security.
But he kept working, mopping floors, emptying trash, coming home to an empty house. Why? Nobody knows. Maybe routine gave him purpose. Maybe work kept him from thinking about the decades ahead, with no wife, no companion, no one to share meals with. Maybe he simply didn't know what else to do. The 1990s arrived, the longest bull market in history. Technology stocks soared. People got rich overnight on companies that had no earnings, no profits, just promises. Ronald owned none of them. His portfolio looked old-fashioned. Procter Gamble, Dow Chemical, JPMorgan Chase, CVS Health, J.M. Smucker, the company that made jam. Jam! While people at cocktail parties talked about Amazon and Microsoft and getting rich quick, Ronald owned stock in a jam company and a soap company and a bank that had been around for 100 years. His co-workers didn't know he owned stocks at all. They saw him drive up in his beat-up car, saw him bring lunch from home in a brown paper bag, saw him wear the same jacket year after year. What they didn't see, the jacket was held together with safety pins. Ronald wouldn't spend $50 on a new coat, not when he could use safety pins, not when that $50 could buy another share of Procter & Gamble. He parked 3 blocks away from work. The parking lot next to JC Penney charged 25 cents. 3 blocks away, Parking was free, 25 cents, to a man whose portfolio was approaching $500,000. His coworkers talked about him in the break room. Poor old Ronald, too cheap to buy a new coat. They laughed. He heard them, said nothing. Sometimes he'd look at his quarterly statements and wonder, what am I doing this for? There was nobody to leave it to, nobody to share it with, just numbers on a page growing larger every quarter. But he didn't stop. He continued. Ronald was 76 years old. He finally retired from JC Penney after more than 20 years of mopping floors. His portfolio was growing faster now, not because he was contributing more. He had stopped working, stopped adding new money, but the compound interest didn't care. The dividends kept coming. He kept reinvesting. The snowball kept rolling. By 2000, age 79, he likely had close to $1 million, maybe more. He lived in the same house, drove the same old car, wore the same jacket with safety pins, cut his own firewood, even though he was nearly 80 years old and could have paid someone $50 to do it. $50. That was another share of stock. The 2000s started with a crash. The dot-com bubble burst. People who had gotten rich on tech stocks lost everything. Fortunes evaporated in months. Ronald's portfolio barely flinched. He didn't own tech stocks. He owned boring companies. Companies that sold soap and toothpaste and prescription drugs. Companies people needed regardless of what the stock market did. His portfolio kept growing. By the mid-2000s, he owned shares in over 95 different companies. 95! The kind of diversification you'd see in a professionally managed fund, except Ronald managed it himself from his $12,000 house in Vermont. He didn't use a financial advisor, didn't have a broker calling him with hot tips. He read, he studied, he made his own decisions, and he never sold. His monthly dividend income grew, $5,000 a month, then $10,000, then $15,000. He didn't change his lifestyle, still drove the old Toyota Yaris, still lived alone. What did he do with $15,000 a month in dividend income? Reinvested it, every penny, back into more shares. September 2008, Ronald was 87 years old. Lehman Brothers collapsed. The financial system nearly broke. The stock market crashed. People who had spent their entire lives building retirement portfolios watched them cut in half in weeks. Panic swept through Wall Street, through Main Street, through every town in America. Ronald owned Lehman Brothers stock. Not a lot, but some. It went to zero. 87 years old, watching part of his life's work vanish, gone completely. Most people his age would have panicked, sold everything. Get me out. I can't lose anymore. Ronald didn't sell. He had held his stocks through the 1970s stagflation, through the 1987 crash, through the 2000 dot-com collapse. He wasn't going to panic now. He stuck with his picks. Procter Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, CVS, the companies that made products people still needed, even in a recession, maybe especially in a recession. People still brushed their teeth, still bought prescriptions, still washed their clothes. The market recovered, slowly, painfully, and Ronald's portfolio recovered with it and kept growing. By 2010, age 89, his dividend income hit $20,000 a month. $20,000 every month. Tax advantaged because qualified dividends get favorable treatment. He lived on maybe $2,000 a month. Social Security covered most of that. The other $18,000 reinvested, month after month, year after year. He was in his 90s now, living alone, no wife for 44 years. No close friends, stepchildren who lived their own lives and visited occasionally. Every day the same routine. Wake up, read the newspaper, check his stocks, go for a walk, come home, eat a simple dinner, alone. Quarterly statements showed numbers that made him blink. $5 million, then $6 million, then $7 million. Nobody knew. His neighbors saw an old man who wore a coat with safety pins, who drove a car that should have been in a junkyard, who lived in a house worth less than a new SUV. They felt sorry for poor old Ronald, all alone, barely scraping by. He owned $8 million in stocks. Why didn't he spend it? Why didn't he travel? Buy a nice car, a comfortable house, enjoy the money he had spent 69 years accumulating? Nobody knows. He never explained, never wrote it down, never told anyone. Maybe he didn't know how to live any other way. The Great Depression, the war, 69 years of discipline and denial. Maybe it wasn't about the money anymore. Maybe it was just who he was. Or maybe And this is the hardest question. Maybe he was saving for something that never came, a purpose that never materialized, a reason that passed away with his wife in 1970. June 2014, Ronald James Reed passed away in his sleep, age 93. His stepson arranged a small funeral. A few people came, not many. Ronald hadn't been close to anyone. They buried him, filed the death certificate, waited for the estate to be settled. Nobody expected much. The old janitor probably had $50,000, maybe $100,000 if he'd been really careful. Social Security, savings, nothing special. The lawyers spent months verifying everything, and then 6 months later, everything changed. February 2015, 8 months after Ronald's passing, the estate documents were finally processed. The lawyers had spent months verifying everything, tracking down every account, every stock certificate, every dividend reinvestment. The numbers were real. $8,024,827 in stocks. Over 95 different positions, blue chips, dividend aristocrats, companies that had been paying dividends for decades. Procter Gamble, $246,000. JPMorgan Chase, $194,000. General Electric, $188,000. Johnson & Johnson, $156,000. CVS Health, $142,000. Dow Chemical, $128,000. JM Smucker, $94,000. The list went on and on. Shares in companies that made toothpaste, jam, prescription drugs, detergent, banking services, boring companies. The kind financial advisors recommend to retirees who can't afford to take risks. Except Ronald had 95 of them. His stepson, Philip Brown, sat in the attorney's office staring at page after page of holdings. He told reporters later, "I had no clue." No clue that the man who wore safety pins had a portfolio worth $8 million. No clue that the man who parked blocks away to save quarters was receiving $20,000 a month in dividends. No clue that his stepfather, the quiet janitor, had been building wealth for 69 years while living like he had nothing. The will specified the distribution: $4.8 million to Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, the largest single donation in the hospital's 117-year history. $1.2 million to Brooks Memorial Library, more money than the library's entire operating budget for 3 years. $2 million to his stepchildren and their families. The hospital got the call first. The development director, Gina Pattison, thought it was a joke. "A what?" she said. $4.8 million from Ronald Reed, the janitor. She pulled up his records. He'd been a patient there, nothing unusual, regular checkups, some treatments. He'd never donated before, not even $20. Now he was giving them $4.8 million. It was a great surprise, she told reporters. That was an understatement. The library director had a similar reaction. Over $1 million from a man who returned books on time and never spoke to anyone. Jerry Carbone, who worked at the library, remembered Ronald. He was very smart, Carbone said. He did not have a formal education in terms of college, but he was very smart. Smart enough to build a fortune that would transform both institutions forever. The story hit the Brattleboro Reformer first. Local paper, small circulation. Janitor leaves millions to hospital and library. Then it spread. The Today Show picked it up. Boston.com ran a feature. Sky News in the UK covered it. Within days, Ronald Reed's story was international news. The janitor with the safety pins who left $8 million. Neighbors came forward with memories. The man who drove a beat-up car, who chopped his own firewood in his 80s, who never went on vacation, never ate at restaurants, never bought anything he didn't absolutely need. They had felt sorry for him. The poor old man, all alone. He'd been wealthier than everyone on his street combined. The contrast was staggering. The house was valued at $12,000. The car might have been worth $2,000. His entire lifestyle, housing, transportation, clothes, food, probably cost him less than $25,000 a year, while he was collecting $240,000 a year in dividends. Financial bloggers dissected his portfolio. Investment sites analyzed his strategy. He became a case study. an inspiration, proof that ordinary people with ordinary incomes could build extraordinary wealth. But nobody could answer the real question. Why? Why live that way? Why the safety pins? Why the 3-block walk to save a quarter? Why 44 years of isolation and discipline and denial? He left $8 million to a hospital and a library. Noble, generous, transformative. But he'd also left behind a life of solitude. No travel, no luxuries, no joy that money could have bought. His stepchildren couldn't explain it. The neighbors couldn't explain it. The lawyers couldn't explain it. Ronald Read had taken the answer to his grave. What remained was the money and the legacy and a story that would make people wonder, was he wise or tragic, disciplined or obsessed, a hero or a cautionary tale? The hospital began planning new equipment purchases. MRI machines that could detect cancers earlier, surgical robots for delicate procedures, equipment that would save lives Ronald would never see saved. Brooks Memorial Library started scholarship programs for students, new collections, community education. The library where Ronald had returned books on time, never speaking to anyone, now bore his legacy on every new book purchased with his gift. His stepchildren received $2 million. It changed their lives, but they still couldn't answer why their stepfather had lived the way he did, why he never told them, why he chose 44 years of isolation over sharing what he'd built. The money went where Ronald wanted it. The hospital, the library, the family, all of it distributed according to his will. But what he didn't leave behind was an explanation. Ronald Read's story spread beyond Brattleboro, beyond Vermont, beyond the United States. He became a symbol, the janitor with $8 million, proof that ordinary people with ordinary incomes could build extraordinary wealth. Financial websites analyzed his portfolio. Investment books mentioned his story. He was held up as evidence that the system works, that patience pays off, that discipline triumphs. But that analysis missed something important. Ronald's story isn't just about accumulation, it's about cost. He accumulated $8 million. That's real, documented, undeniable. He also accumulated 44 years of solitude. That's equally real, equally documented, equally undeniable. The same discipline that built his fortune also isolated him from human connection. The same frugality that allowed him to save every dollar also prevented him from enjoying a single one. The same patience that let him hold stocks for decades also meant he held on to a life that never changed. Was it worth it? Nobody can answer that but Ronald, and he's gone. Ronald's life suggests certain principles that transcend investing. First, in his case, time proved to be a powerful multiplier. Ronald didn't have a high income, didn't have insider knowledge, didn't have luck or genius or privilege. He had time, 69 years, and he used every single one of them. Second, for Ronald, simplicity compounded more effectively than complexity might have. 95 stocks sounds complicated, but they were all boring. Procter Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, companies that made soap and Band-Aids, no exotic derivatives, no cryptocurrency, no schemes, just shares in companies that sold products people needed for decades. Third, Ronald's story shows that what others thought didn't affect what worked for him. His neighbors thought he was poor. His co-workers pitied him. Society judged him. None of it mattered. The scoreboard at the end was $8 million. The opinions were worth nothing. Fourth, in Ronald's case, what looked like obsession to others proved to be discipline once the results became known. While he was alive, people saw a man who wouldn't buy a $50 coat. After he passed away, they saw a man who built $8 million. Same actions, different interpretation, because results change how we judge behavior. Ronald Read's story forces an uncomfortable question that most financial success stories avoid. What is wealth for? He had $8 million. He lived like he had nothing. He could have traveled the world, could have helped his family while he was alive, could have enjoyed even a fraction of what he'd built. He didn't. Why? Maybe he was saving for a future that never came. Maybe after his wife passed away, he didn't know what else to do but continue the pattern. Maybe the accumulation became the purpose, and he forgot to ask what it was all for. Or maybe, and this is harder to accept, maybe he was content. Maybe the discipline gave him meaning. Maybe watching the numbers grow was enough. Maybe he didn't want what money could buy. We judge his life through our values. We see the safety pins and think tragedy. We see the isolation and think waste. But we don't know what he thought. We don't know if he passed away satisfied or regretful. What we know is this: he made choices. He lived with them for 69 years. He left behind money that would help thousands of people, and he left behind a question that has no easy answer. In 2025, algorithms trade millions of times per second. Cryptocurrencies promise overnight wealth. Social media influencers sell courses on getting rich quick. And Ronald Reed's story, 69 years, safety pins, $8 million, quietly reminds us that some truths don't change with technology. A decade after his story became public, people still cite him, still hold him up as proof of what's possible, but they miss the full picture. Ronald Reed proved that a janitor can become a multimillionaire. That's true.
He also proved that you can accumulate a fortune and still pass away alone. That's equally true. His life doesn't offer a blueprint. It offers a mirror. What you see in his story says more about you than about him. If you see inspiration, you value discipline and delayed gratification. If you see tragedy, you value experience and human connection. If you see both, you understand that every choice has a cost, and wealth is just one measure of a life. Ronald Reed passed away with $8 million in stocks, a $12,000 house, and a coat held together with safety pins. He was the richest man in his town and the loneliest. He left more money to charity than most people earn in 10 lifetimes. And he spent 69 years building something nobody knew existed. He spent 44 years saving for a future that never came, and left a legacy that will never end. Ronald Reed made his choice every single day for 69 years, and nobody, not his neighbors, not his family, not history, gets to tell him if it was the right one.